Hello, and welcome back to the Fit Positive podcast. This is where we talk common sense about health and fitness in midlife, how to look after your body and your mind at this stage of life, being intentional with how we move and how we eat, and focusing only on what's actually backed by science. Because social media has a habit of taking individual ingredients and turning them into headlines, good or bad, healthy or toxic, without the appropriate nuance or context. And that's exactly what prompted today's episode. I've been getting comments recently on a reel that I shared, which is a recipe, a homemade nutty granola recipe, questioning the use of vegetable oil or seed oil in that recipe. And it's a perfect example of how confusing nutrition can become when ingredients are judged in isolation rather than as part of an overall diet. So today, I want to clear this up properly. We're going to talk about why seed oils have become such a hot topic online, what the science actually says when we step back and look at the evidence, and how guidance from organizations like the World Health Organization fits into this conversation. Because when you understand food in context, macronutrients, quantities, and overall dietary patterns, you don't need to label individual foods as good or bad. So let's talk about the real problem here, which is not any particular ingredient. The real problem is confusion. So let's start here. Most women I work with are not eating badly. They cook at home. They care about their health. They're trying to make good food choices, but they're constantly being told different things by social media. Often it's social media influencers as opposed to nutrition scientists. One week it's carbs, the next it's sugar, now it's seed oils. And the result is not better health, it's confusion. And that's what causes poor health outcomes. Because when ingredients are pulled out of context and labeled as bad, we lose sight of what actually matters, the overall pattern of how you eat, move, sleep, and live. So let's discuss what seed oils actually are. Seed oils, often called vegetable oils, include oils like sunflower, soybean, canola oil, and corn oil. From a nutrition standpoint, they are simply a source of fat, one of the three macronutrients alongside proteins and carbohydrates. Fat is energy dense, and this is what has given it a bad rap over the years. It provides about 9 calories per gram in comparison with proteins and carbs, which provide only 4 calories per gram. This does not make it bad. Fat is required for hormone production, vitamin absorption, and satiety. But you just don't need huge amounts of fat, so quantity matters when it comes to fat. One of the clearest, most evidence-based discussions on seed oils comes from a nutrition scientist called Dr. Layne Norton. He's a PhD nutrition scientist in the US, and he looks at the actual human data, not theories, not cherry-picked studies, but real outcomes. And his conclusion is very, very clear. Seed oils are not uniquely harmful. They are not toxic, and they are not inherently inflammatory when eaten in normal quantities as part of a balanced diet. Fats can be categorized as saturated and unsaturated. Unsaturated are the healthy fats, and that's the category that seed oil fits into. Seed oil is a type of unsaturated fat. When unsaturated fats replace saturated fats, we often see improvements in markers like LDL cholesterol. So saturated fat is proven to increase LDL cholesterol, which increases your risk of heart disease. That's saturated fat. Seed oil is unsaturated fat. It's part of the healthy type of fat, which has been proven to decrease LDL cholesterol and improve heart health. So the science does not support the idea that seed oils on their own cause poor health outcomes. So let's look at now what the World Health Organization says. And this is important because if seed oils were genuinely dangerous, we would expect global public health bodies to warn against them, right? These organizations are not to be dismissed. They use experts in the world, global health experts, and massive bodies of evidence to come up with their guidelines. And the World Health Organization focuses on moderating total fat intake. We do not want to overconsume fat because that'll be an overconsumption of calories, which will lead to obesity, and that in itself increases your heart disease risk. So the World Health Organization recommends moderating total fat intake, reducing saturated fats. So yes, we absolutely do need to moderate our intake of saturated fat, Of course, they don't say eliminate saturated fat altogether because that's never required. But we do need to keep our saturated fat intake under 25 grams a day for women, 30 grams for men. They also recommend eliminating industrial trans fats. So these are the types of fats in ultra processed food. And they also recommend prioritizing overall diet quality, which is what we do on our program. Seed oils fall into the category of unsaturated fat, which are considered acceptable and often preferable when they replace saturated fats. So please don't categorize seed oils as an unhealthy fat. They are not an unhealthy fat, and the World Health Organization does not recommend eliminating seed oils. The World Health Organization's real concerns are excess calorie intake. So being overweight or obese is a huge health risk. They also have concerns around ultra-processed diets, not ultra-processed food individually, but a diet that is largely made up of ultra-processed food is dangerous for our health. Low fiber intake. We need to focus on our fiber intake and increase that. And poor overall dietary patterns. This means, so what we talk about is if 80% of your food is whole, healthy food and 20% of your food comes from processed food, that's fine. An 80-20 approach is healthy. It's when that's flipped and 80% of your food comes from processed or ultra-processed foods and only 20% comes from whole foods, that's when the problems arise. So we need to zoom out and take that macro-based view of our diet. What's your overall dietary pattern like? Not what specific ingredient do you have in a small amount in a particular recipe. Okay, so let's move on to macronutrients and thresholds. Thresholds are often ignored, and I really feel like this is the missing piece of the puzzle for a lot of people. There are thresholds for nutrients. A lot of study was done on these thresholds. Below each threshold means usually it's not enough of this nutrient. Within the threshold is supportive for your health, and above the threshold, it can work against your goals. So like I said, when it comes to saturated fat, there's a threshold there of 25 grams per day for women. So you do not want to go above 25 grams per day because that can increase your risk of heart disease. But below that threshold is safe. And this applies to everything: fats, carbohydrates, protein, nuts, oils, even healthy whole foods are not safe if you have too much of them, because this will cause overweight and obesity. So this is why I say every single day, all foods are safe in certain quantities and no individual foods need to be eliminated in order to have a healthy diet. You need to think about your overall dietary pattern, not specific ingredients in small amounts. As long as, and we track our food on my program, and you can see how much, for example, saturated fat you're taking in each day. Across the day, you want to see that your intake is less than 25 grams. But in a specific recipe, it's okay to have a little bit of saturated fat. So problems don't arise because an ingredient exists in a food or a recipe. They arise when quantities creep up without awareness. And that's not a seed oil problem. That's a portion problem and a pattern problem. So we really, really need to zoom out and stop labeling individual ingredients as good or bad. So let's bring this back to a real life example. I eat my nutty granola every single day. And yes, it contains vegetable oil. And my recent blood results, which I shared in a heart health podcast episode, and I reshared that podcast episode today, so you can see that in the recent episodes, show excellent cardiovascular and metabolic health. All of my biomarkers, and I really do recommend that you look at your own biomarkers and have those checked instead of just labeling foods as good or bad. Have your biomarkers checked and see how you're doing. So for me, cardiovascular and metabolic health is optimal. It's in the excellent range. And I have that nutty granola every single day with vegetable oil in it. So what does this mean? That vegetable oil is not negatively impacting my heart health. So this is a unique real life example. I'm not talking about the science in this particular segment. I mentioned the science earlier, but just so you know, my heart health is perfect. I have that nutty granola every single day. Patterns matter more than fear about a particular ingredient. So what's the bigger takeaway here? I'm not interested in labeling foods as good or bad, and nor should you be. When we do that, we oversimplify nutrition. It's more nuanced than that. It's about the combination of nutrients that you consume across the day, across the week, across your whole dietary pattern, not specific ingredients in small amounts. When we do label these foods as good or bad, we create unnecessary rules which can cause fear and unhealthy eating behaviors, and we can end up second guessing ourselves. When we zoom out and we understand macronutrients, thresholds, basic nutrition and context, we gain confidence, and confident eaters don't panic over individual ingredients. They look at the bigger picture and they succeed. So if there's one thing I want you to take from today's episode, it's this: nutrition does not need extremes to work. It needs basic understanding of the simplest nutrition concepts. And when you step back from social media headlines and look at the full picture, the science, the thresholds, the quantities, the overall pattern, things become much simpler and easier to manage. Simplicity is what makes healthy habits sustainable. That's why I spend my life simplifying nutrition for you. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. I will see you in the next one.